for having me on.
Yeah, I feel like I know you, but I've never met you. This is the first time conversation. So nice to properly connect. Although in real life will be the way to go in future, I'm sure. Ollie, you're a busy man in the corporate health arena, and yeah, I've been hearing some good things about Essentio Health. And obviously your name with attached to that as well. So I'd be interested to hear and start off by if you can tell us a little bit about your new it's probably not a new business, but it's relatively new. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to have joined forces with Justin Vaughan, my business partner, who came up with Essentio Health just pre-COVID. And like a lot of ideas that sounded great pre-COVID, they had to weather the storm that was COVID.
Yes.
And it's a face-to-face personalized service, right? So COVID
Yep.
was certainly a curveball to it. But Justin was, or he is a doctor, but he also played international cricket for New Zealand and then was CEO of New Zealand cricket for a while as well, and then spent some time with NIB as a senior executive there at the same sort of time that I was at Medibank. So we've both kind of got an elite sport background. He did the elite sport. I just facilitated the elite sport in sports science, but we'll gloss over that. And then time kind of at the executive level within businesses and in health insurance. And so essentially we're born out of a real desire to have a personalized service of testing and assessment of the whole of an executive, so mind, body, and soul, through things like a DEXA scan or a ring for sleep hygiene, making sure that we got blood pressure, function of movement screens, grip strength, VO2 max, all of the things that really build up the full human, including mental health assessments and relationship health and personality assessments, so that we could get a really good idea of how is that person, forget the title, forget anything else, but how is this human being doing at the moment? And then following on from that, 4 to 5 weeks worth and DNA testing in there, blood tests in there, and so on, creating and really co-creating a plan to improve the health and performance of that executive. And then that coaching or that accountability partnership in the latter stages of that can last 3 or 6 or 12 months, depending on what the executive is looking for. And so in essence, it's all of the stuff I used to do with elite athletes, but for the corporate athlete. And in the last conversation that I had with you guys, with Josh, my philosophy around treating people like the corporate athlete hasn't changed in the last 25 years. Like, it is a really clear delineation, I think, of saying, hey, you may not be being paid millions to go and play football or whatever it is, but you're just as worthy of that care and attention. And when we see athletes overtraining and not performing and not showing up for a world championship, well, that's exactly the same as an executive burning out or not being able to perform in the boardroom. So how do we take the learnings from sports science and put them into the boardroom so that we can have the same impact on health and performance?
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thanks. And I do recall your was it a three-legged stool analogy or something along those lines
100%.
from your past episode with us? Can you remind us of that analogy that you ran through? I don't know if you can remember it.
Oh, I can certainly remember. I still use it daily. So with my athletes, the first thing I used to get them to do was just in their mind's eye, close their eyes and visualize the three-legged stool. And the 3 legs of that stool are activity, nutrition, and recovery. And the reason why I use that analogy of a 3-legged stool is because if those 3 legs are on the ground, it's a really stable base and the foundation is solid to build on top of, and you can sit on it, no problem. With my athletes, what I found was as soon as the training load was too high or the recovery protocol wasn't good enough, one of those legs got lifted off the ground and then it was a really unstable base. So I still use that visualization tool now with my corporate athletes because it's just as true. The problem is when we talk about that recovery leg, whether it be breathing or sleep or any of the other parts of that recovery leg, we don't have a team of professionals around us to remind us, hey, you stayed up late doing that spreadsheet or designing that presentation or getting ready for the pitch. Hey, that's going to have an impact on your ability to perform over the next 24, 48 hours. So we need to readdress the balance of the legs of that stool. And that grounding exercise first thing in the morning, and I banish mobile phones from the bedroom because I don't want that to be the first thing people grab in the morning. When people put their feet on the ground, when they first ground themselves in the morning, when they get out of bed, I want my corporate athletes to think, how am I doing? How are the legs of my stool? Where do I need to put my energy today to mean that I have a stable base to build my performance off?
Mm. Yeah, I love that analogy. I'm definitely going to run with that now that I've heard it a second time, mate. That's unreal. And with Essentio Health, it's obviously that assessment sounds fantastic. So things like looking at fitness, sleep, body composition, diet, stress management, and it sounds like genetics as well. I'm just out of interest. You must be have collected a fair bit of, I guess, data and have done lots of assessments. Now I'm wondering, just at a really broad level, like, are there any things standing out from you from the data that has been you've been collecting for a little while around any really obvious things? Because in my head, I think of, for executives, I think stress management and sleep as being maybe the two areas that would be hotspots, but I could be wrong.
No, you're spot on.
Oh, okay.
Time and time again, we
Yes.
see that, if we use that and go back to that analogy, it's that recovery leg that is tend to be forgotten about. And the age-old adage of I'll sleep when I'm dead, or I'm a unique individual. I can survive and I can thrive off 4 hours sleep. We fundamentally know that's not true. Um,
Mm,
the challenge that we have with that is that often we're working with very, very data driven individuals. And so we need to show them the raw data from their Aura ring and show them how just adding a bit of sleep can revolutionize how they feel, how they perform. But the most important thing is that, unfortunately, sorry, I've just done a thumbs up and it's come up on the screen.
that's all right.
Thanks for making me
All
feel better doing it too.
right.
One of the things that we know, unfortunately, through the data is that if somebody is underslept, we know that that has an impact on their performance over the next 24, 48 hours. And Sydney Uni and a lot of the executives that I'm working with aren't just dealing with a 45-minute sleep debt, so they're not sleeping 6 hours 15, they're sleeping 4 hours 15 or 5 hours 15. They've got 2, 3 hours of a sleep debt day in or night in, night out. And that's really problematic because it's a little bit like alcohol consumption. A lot of people think that they're a better singer or a better dancer, or they improve with a little bit of alcohol. And driving, there was a lot of research done a few years ago around a few drinks and people's assessment of their driving skills. Though the degradation of your own performance, but more importantly, the degradation in the psychological safety of your team when you're underslept is dramatic. And that is, unfortunately, often blind to the individual. They don't know that they're having that degradation of the psychological safety of their team, but it's happening. And it becomes normalized. It becomes, hey, early bird catches the worm. And I've just got to make sure that, I turn up and we've got to start addressing our sleep hygiene and the expectation of we cannot perform at our best if we don't give our bodies that chance to recover. And especially, when we talk about the autonomic nervous system and getting the body in the right frame of mind to get good deep sleep, we know that shutting your laptop at 12 o'clock at night and thinking that you'll blissfully fall asleep beautifully, especially if the last email that you read got you riled up, we're
Mhm.
not robots. We
Yep.
need our bodies to have that time and those signals of reducing temperature, reducing light entering our retinas, all of these important signals for the body to produce melatonin. We're just not giving our bodies those signals. So not only are we concertinaing the amount of sleep, we're also not giving it the right framework to get good deep sleep. And we know that's when all of our emotional regulation and
Mhm.
thought consolidation happens. So you're spot on that managing our stress levels, so therefore we're managing our autonomic nervous system, fight or flight or rest and recover, to then allow us to get the right amount of sleep. An effect in terms of how are we then going to perform at our best when we do our training session? How are we going to make the right decisions around our nutrition? Because we know when we're sleep deprived, our ghrelin goes up and our leptin goes down, and we tend to make poor food choices. And there's lots of reasons for that, but the reason why we call it essential health is because we're talking about the essentials, because we are breaking things down to the most simplistic form, not because our clients aren't immensely clever and very, very accomplished in their own field. Break it down to the essentials and make it really simple.
Yeah, that's unreal. I love that. Interesting with recovery, and just whilst we're on the talking recovery, and that particular leg, I guess, of your stool. There's a lot of different trends out at the moment, isn't there? There's things like, well, I say trends. Perhaps there's some good evidence around them, but for high performers, and I always think of executives, high performers. The first picture I have is sort of that Type A personality who is the person that buys the sauna for their house, the ice bath for their backyard. Um, Maybe they've got the resources, I mean, financially, to sort of get heavily involved into fitness as well. So sometimes they're that person that goes to the gym 5 times a week, 6 times a week, up at six. And yeah, they're sleep deprived, but they're doing all those other things really well. Ollie, I'm wondering, from those different modalities that they're not new, they've been around for a while, the ice baths and the saunas and stuff. Do you notice some of your clients that are executives getting into those types of things, or is there a kind of a person that an executive type where they are doing all the right things fitness wise, and they're kind of almost going too far the other way?
Really, really good question, Tom. And ultimately, this is where I find myself really straddled across two different camps.
Yeah.
Now, the evidence around heat shock proteins and sauna use is very, very clear, and Rhonda Patrick is, very, very articulate at giving all of the breakdown of the benefits of that. Same with Huberman and cold exposure and ice baths and protocols, and they're all got their place. The thing that I always come back to, though, those are the 1 to 5%ers. The
Mm.
reason why we focus on the essentials is because there's no point laddering on top those 1%ers when you're missing the 20%ers. And getting a good night's sleep, if it wasn't so critical for us, natural selection would have got rid of it thousands and thousands of years ago. If you're thinking about our only reason for being was to pass on our genetic code, and being eaten by a predator is pretty bad for that. So
Yes.
sleeping for 7 to 9 hours and being able to be eaten is much easier, right? So if it wasn't so critical for us as human beings, we would have got rid of it, and we've not been able to. So
Mm.
even by that nature, it is a 20%er. Eating a good diet with great fiber, with enough protein, so we're feeding our gut microbiome. They are the things, they are the fundamental building blocks. And so if you're going back to, and that's why I find myself in two camps, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, they have a place. And in fact, this shows my age, but back when I was at university, loads of my counterparts and my peers were doing their final thesis, their dissertation on the effect of ice baths on sports performance. Mine was on the other side of it. Mine was on sports specific warm-ups and the
Yep.
impact on performance. But equally, that was a long time ago,
Yep.
embarrassingly so. And that was still back then, lots of evidence coming out, and it is efficacious to a certain degree.
Mm.
Now, yes, you can find equal amounts of research around ice baths and the blunting of the hypertrophy curve and so on, and what is it, the outcome you're looking for. And we could wax lyrical about it. I still come back to, though, if we are leaving those 20%ers on the table, we're kidding ourselves. And really, I'm not doing the person the right service because I'm letting them play around at the edges. But equally, if we've got, to use your term, that alpha that's coming in that has absolutely everything else is nailed down, and they are squeezing that sponge as much as they can in everywhere they can, then absolutely let's have a conversation about those 1, 2, 3 percenters.
Yeah.
But until we've got those essential things sorted, let's spend our time, effort, and focus on that
Mm. Yeah, it's in the it's, as you said, it's in the name, Essentio. I love it.
deliberately.
Yeah, the reason I bring that one up is because I could count like the amount of people that I speak with, and they're like, oh, I've got an ice bath, and I'm listening to all the wellness bros on the podcasts and stuff, but I also know that they're in other parts of their basic level of health, like sleep, that they're really getting poor night's sleep, or they're really stressed because they've got their own business and
Yeah.
managing lots of other things. So it's kind of nice to, I guess, understand where those things fit in the bigger picture. Um, Ollie, I'm wondering then with Essentio Health, you go through like if you're a person that goes through this, you get the assessment done, and then it sounds like obviously it's quite comprehensive. Then you're getting into, all right, what do we do now? Could you take us through a typical, I guess, like avatar of a client that might then get through a program or what have you?
Yeah, 100%. And it really and Pacific Equity Partners, Musashi, Vardico, some big names. And so their HR departments would send us a list of people that are eligible. We would say, hey, if you'd like to take part in it, we're here and we'll kick off. And so ultimately the journey of an individual is we connect with them. Hopefully they say, yep, sounds good. I'd like to do it. We'll
Mm,
then face to face meet up with them and do an hour's introductory where we do sort of the basics. We'll take a cheek swab for their DNA. We'll take their blood pressure. We'll fit them with an Aura ring. We'll do a functional movement screen to see any muscular imbalances or flexibility issues they may have, things like a plank and push-up tests and so on. After that hour, we'll set them some homework. So they'll go for their DEXA scan so we can see really, really clearly what their muscle mass is, really underrated in today's society, unfortunately,
mm,
but a real problem when it comes to frailty as people age, obviously. We'll look at not only their body fat, which I have a real challenge with society at the moment where we automatically go, you carry excess weight, you're unhealthy, you're thin, you're healthy, when actually, until we know their visceral fat level, we shouldn't be making that conversation
mm,
public. And equally, until we know their blood work and how metabolically healthy they are. The DEXA scan and the blood test really help with that. Plus, it tells us their bone mineral density as well. So for our female clients, that's incredibly important for us. Again, because society on the whole has done us a
mm,
disservice saying, hey, girls, you go swimming and you do yoga and you do weights, you leave those for the boys. Again, fundamentally have an issue with that. And I've got a girl and a boy in the household, and my daughter's 12 and my son's 10, and I'm really keen on making sure that they realize that yeah, sport is there to enjoy. And what you enjoy should be the thing that you pour your heart and soul into. And it shouldn't
mm.
be a blue sport or a pink sport or whatever.
Yeah.
And so making sure that the data is really clear on how is this individual, and that homework will also include a Cooper's Run test. It will include getting their blood test. Once we get the DNA test back, the DNA is really good at showing us, okay, from your mum and your dad, what
Mm,
cards did they give you? What cards were you dealt? Once we know the DNA, it will give us some signs as, okay, when we work with our chief medical officer, what are the blood tests that we want to get done based on the DEXA scan that we have and also the DNA? Because it may show that you'll struggle to process um, whether it's calcium or whether it's vitamin D or iron or whatever. Then we need to see, okay, what are you choosing to do with, and I'm really clear on, don't panic when we do your DNA. This is about, it's not deterministic. This is about getting a baseline to then see how you choosing to play those cards. And a lot of the time people are doing a much better job at playing those cards than what they were given. Then we've usually got about 4 weeks worth of sleep data from their Oura Ring. We've got their blood tests. We also ask them to do an online survey through our portal, which takes about 12 minutes. But that includes the GAD and the PHQ and the RIF and the OCEAN. So we get a much better, broader understanding of family medical history and so on, and what their personality type is, and depression and anxiety risk, and so on. So with all of that data, and that's a huge, huge amount of data.
A lot, isn't it? That's great.
It is. And we can sit down with that person afterwards and really dive deep into how you're feeling. Did this surprise you? And some of the things in the DNA is interesting, in so much as, you know, sugar or sweet taste preference, or bitter taste preference, or how they metabolize their caffeine, all of these things. And sometimes it can be a real beautiful moment for people to go, oh, that's why I emotionally eat, or that's why, you know, when I have some caffeine, I feel anxious. You know, there can be some real validating elements to it, but equally, there can be some moments where they go, oh yeah, I don't struggle with lactose at all. You know, and it's about the balance. It's about lived experience versus the sort of genetic code they were given. And then to your point around what happens then, the co-creation of that plan is really important. A physio that I used to work with once said to me, hey, look, most people that come into my clinic, there's 15, 20 things that they should be doing. But if I give them a list of 20, they'll do none. If I give them a list of 3, they might do 1. And so our job in that,
I can relate to that. I
there we
literally
go.
used to give people one thing to do when they left the physio clinic. Sometimes they would say, oh, can you give me more? And that was like, oh, okay, you can do more. Great. But most of the time, I know I'm giving you a lot of information and you're only going to remember one thing. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
And that is so true. And so we do about a 20-page report on all of that data. It also goes to our clinical dietitian that looks at a 5-day food diary that the person does for us, and provides them with a meal plan and so on, based on their preferences and so on. If I should add, sorry, I didn't mention, but if at any point their blood pressure is over the norm and sort of our protocol, if we see anything in the GAD or the PHQ, we've got a whole host of specialists that we refer through to, either through an EAP system or through our own psychologists, or to our female health expert, Ginny Mansberg. There are ways that we can obviously say, you know what, you'd really, really benefit from going to speak to somebody who specializes in this particular area. But that's more of the exception rather than the rule. Usually what will happen is all of the data is kind of within norms. And we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, we believe that you would over-index in outcome by putting your effort into these 2 or 3 things. So all of the information is in the report, but it's really focusing on these key 3 or 4 things that we believe will obviously have that over-indexing impact. And then it's really designing a plan with them of what they want to achieve, and then being that accountability partner along the journey.
Yeah, that's unreal. And it sounds like, it's obviously very comprehensive. Sounds like the sleep and recovery area is the one that most likely gets a look in terms of intervention, or like, let's do something about this. Um, with the sleep, going back to the sleep, assuming that that's some of the results that you might be getting, or lack of sleep, what are the main, like those sort of 2 or 3 things that people can get the most bang for buck from improving their sleep? I'm assuming getting your phone out of your room. You mentioned that before. Making sure there's no like lot or less light in your room, that kind of thing. Yeah, is there anything else that stands out, or is sort of unique to the executives, or advice that people may not consider?
Oh, you've gone. Oh, you disappeared then. Sorry.
Oh,
You cut out halfway through the question, but I think you were asking around sort of sleep hygiene factors.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the current research, we're very, very lucky. I have a close relationship with Monash Uni and the Turner Institute for Brain and Mental Health. So a lot of the research that's coming out around, you know, sleep consistency or sleep-wake cycle consistency is the most impactful thing that we can do. So if we think about how our bodies evolved to fall asleep, we had this big external stimulator, which was the sun, right?
Mm.
lots of light during the morning, and then as the sun went down, less light entering our retinas. As that went down, the temperature went down, and those are really big signals for us to have a good night's sleep. Now, that sleep wake cycle now is being seen to be even more impactful than sleep duration. And so, keeping a consistent pattern between when you go to sleep on a weekday and a weekend within about what we believe at the moment, within a window of about 70 minutes, is really critical. When we've worked with athletes, we see that there's a detrimental impact if it's over that 70-minute window of when you would normally go to sleep. Um, Making sure that your body goes, okay, I may not have got the stimulus of lower light levels, or I may not have got the stimulus of being cooler, but I know that this is around the time that I usually fall asleep. It's critical to allow our bodies to fall into those really low levels of sleep. That's a pretty generic term, like we've heard for many, many years, that 90 minutes before you fall asleep, turn down the lights in your house,
Mm.
or stop using your mobile phone, or the nuanced parts of it is, now we know there is a genetic difference between adaptations to light entering the retinas. So some people are high responders, so just a little bit of light can make them not fall asleep for a long time. Others
Mm.
can actually get a lot more light and not be so affected. So for us, it's about a bit of trial and error, to be honest. It's a bit of, okay, if you're struggling to sleep now, let's get a baseline of what you're doing. And when I make the throwaway line that people are shutting the lid of their laptop on their laps in bed at midnight, that's not by accident. Like, that is stuff I hear. And if
Mm.
you're really het up about that, there is adrenaline and cortisol soaring through your body, and that in essence is your amygdala saying, we're not safe. Like, we are
Mm.
not safe. We cannot fall asleep. There is a predator out there.
Mm.
And that's a really, really important factor of us not falling asleep quickly, or even worse, sort of going to very light levels of sleep. And we know that those early hours of sleep are really important to get our, to really highly index in our deep sleep, which is where obviously our emotional regulation and hormone regulation and a lot of other memory and cognition benefits happen. We're just not getting it. And so the five kind of key things that I say to clients is, keep your consistency really, really clear. Reduce the amount of light entering your retinas, really 90 to 2 hours before you want to fall asleep. Make sure that your bedroom is cooler than you think. Around 17, 18 degrees is what's recommended. And often our houses are way, way warmer than that.
Mm.
The next is, banish your phone from your bedroom. If that thing's been stimulating you throughout the day, that thing is still telling your amygdala, hey, this could stimulate me. And if it's on the bedside table, it's just too close.
Yeah.
And then the last one is what's called a dump pad. It's just a pen and paper by your bed that allows you to write down the thing that's going around your brain. There's something really cathartic about, if you've got an idea, or if you've got a problem, or if you've got something that's keeping you awake, rather than just ruminating about it, getting it out of your head and onto a piece of paper can be really cathartic and can have a big
Yeah.
impact on us falling asleep.
Yeah, that's a beauty, that one. I think a lot of people, what they do if they're on remunerating over a thought, is they'll get their phone and they'll just scroll
Yeah.
scroll themselves silly, to numb their brain. And Ollie, one thing I recently purchased probably a few months ago was like one of those really old school alarm clocks.
Right.
To replace the phone, because I've been on enough of these chats to know that I'm doing the wrong thing, but I never changed it until a few months ago. And I must admit, that plus a eye mask, and my sleep has been phenomenal since making that change. And I think it was just that subconscious thing of I actually had the phone because of the torch function on it, the thing. So I actually bought a little torch as well, because my kids always are getting up in the middle of the night. They're youngish, so yeah. So it was more like the amazing Apple iPhone with the torch inbuilt was actually what hooked me into keeping it next to me. But now I've replaced it with two things, two cheap
Yeah.
things. But it's
100%.
been great.
And
Mm,
it can have, often it just is a conversation. It's okay, what's holding you back from banishing the phone? Oh, it's I listen to my podcasts to drift to sleep, or
mm,
it's my alarm clock, or it's where I put my great ideas. Whether it's a dump pad, whether it's a cheap torch, whether it's a
mm,
$2 alarm clock, there's simple and easy non-tech ways to get around it. But sometimes we need to make that decision. And that's
mm.
easier said than done. A lot of them are simple, they're just not easy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, that was a really sort of dumb slash simple solution, and yeah, had a massive impact on my ability to sleep all the way through, rather than the problem was waking up, I guess, for me. No, that's really interesting, Ollie, and I love the way that Essentio has packaged all of that up into a super comprehensive assessment. It just sounds like there's just so much value in how comprehensive it is, and then being able to pick out where those, I guess, those hotspots are, and the intervention sort of kicks in for those executives. Just from your perspective, I'm just if we sort of think maybe 5 to 10 years ahead for Essentio, and also yourself, like what do you think are the main trends that will not be trendy like an ice bath, but will, I guess, the areas in this space that will only become better with time to enhance our performance and longevity. So, things, where are the, I guess, the trends in all those different pillars that you've been talking about?
Yeah, really good question, and I wish I knew, because I'd be
Mm.
investing in some of them and
Yeah.
be able to retire. But I joke, because actually, having gone through the corporate Australia world, and I've had the benefit of being in both.
Mm,
I do what I do genuinely because I do love it, and it is a privilege to be able to work with people. I know that sounds like a corny line, and I apologize, but it genuinely is true. I fundamentally struggled as I got more senior in different roles, because I was further away from the people that I was
mm,
trying to help, and I love that. And so Essentio is a beautiful, selfishly, a beautiful way to
mm,
be really at the cutting edge of working with people. Now, where that goes, the interesting point that I kind of believe is we've almost gone too far away. We're looking for an app for that, or we're looking for a tech solution for that, or
mm.
chat GPT to solve this problem for us. And they can
Yeah.
do great things. Like, I love my Aura Ring. But just as important as the data that this gives me, the subjective, how am I feeling, is
Yes.
also really important from a sleep health standpoint. So the objective with the subjective. And I think that as human beings, there is a huge value in being cared for, feeling like someone's there on the journey with us, to sometimes be the militant
Mm,
drill sergeant and sometimes be the mother hen, like a combination of both. And we are missing that. And so when I think of the times when people ask me, what are the things that we need to do to really help us with our health? A lot of it's listen to what your grandparent used to tell you. If we think about going for a walk after dinner, lots of our grandparents did that. They went and walked around the local square or around the local block in the community. Things like making sure that we were knowing who our neighbors were and had a community around where we were, and getting out into fresh air. They generally ate off smaller plates and smaller knives and fork. And a lot of the talks that I do, a joke that I play is I show a bone handled set of cutlery that nearly 90% of the crowd always either had or their grandparents had. And I use that as a mental anchor to say, but think about what you were also doing at that time. You were usually with no screens, sitting down at a dinner table with a
mm,
smaller plate and smaller cups, which we know means that you eat less. You were doing it in a mindful and supportive social way. And usually the food that was on that plate was real food. It wasn't this
mm,
UPF, this ultra processed food that was nourishing to our bodies. If we go back to some of those things, and my gran used to always say to me, the hours before midnight count for double. Now, she had
mm.
no scientific background to say that, but actually, the science now shows us that that is true. And there's lots of those sayings that I always used to hear from my grandparents that now I think are true. So when I get asked a lot about, what is the future of this space, and what are the
Yes.
trends, and where do we need to go? Hey, if we just took a step back and looked at where we've come from and where we are now, there's huge advantages of where we are now. But let's not throw away into the trash can all of the beauty of what we used to do, because
Mm.
there is real gold there.
Yeah. Gee, that's good. That's very, very good. All the wisdom from all the years before us makes a lot of sense just to go back to, and it's kind of like subtracting rather than adding things into a more, because of technology allows us to overanalyze and assess our health, which is step one, but it's probably more the what do you do next? And I really liked your point about sometimes having that almost that personal trainer approach to your health. Like everyone needs that accountability. Everyone needs social connection as well. And I know for me, going through with my just general fitness, physical fitness, ended up joining a small group training session, and it's like 2 years later, and I'm going every most days and really enjoying it. But it becomes the social, the community side that makes you keep going back. And yes, there's physical benefits and mental and all that sort of thing, but it's actually the people and the fun that I have by going is half the benefit as well. So
Mm. And
Ollie, really good.
we see that
Mm,
in the blue zone research. It's been around for 30 odd years. I can't remember how long ago I read the book, but it's a good 15 years ago that I read Dan's book around the blue
yes.
zones. And it's not rocket science, but
Yeah.
it is around. I remember, not that I was around then, but I remember once reading that Time magazine on the front of in the like 50s, when automation was really starting to come, it
Yeah.
talked about this utopian life where robots were going to take all socializing and living the good life. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen that happen. What we did was we took all that automation and then we packed in more stuff. And I think we'll have a
Yeah.
second revolution of that with, whether it's artificial intelligence or whatever's coming next. The AI side of things could give us more time to focus on our health. But unless we really double down on making sure we do that, we'll
Mm,
probably just fill our time with more stuff that's making us less happy, less healthy. And, our ability to just normalize being cared for, being
mm,
part of a community that cares for the community as a whole. And you're a key part of that, which,
mm.
is so powerful for our physical and mental well being.
Absolutely. Ollie, really good points today, and really interesting stuff at Essentio Health. And thanks for sharing all of your insights today. I've absolutely loved hearing about it. For those that are listening and want to follow Ollie, I'll put in the show notes the different links to Essentio Health and Build a Bridge. Thanks, Ollie.
My pleasure.